Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So, after just a few days of having the new Monster Champion system in place, the developers have decided to make a big change and nerf Monster Champions. Prior to the nerf, the percentage chance of a monster to spawn as a champion was 12%. This was recently clarified from a previous developer post that said it was around 10%. But anyways, after the nerf, the chance has been changed from 12% to 6% on hard and from 12% to 9% on elite. Also, the percentage chance of a mini boss to spawn as a monster champion before the nerf was very high. The developers didn't tell us exactly what it was, but from what we can tell from developer comments, it seemed to have been very, very high, like 90%. That has since been changed to 33% on hard and 66% on elite. And the champion damage boost has been reduced by 25%. And this is why, according to a developer quote, the developers said, "We do have the ability to readjust champion spawn rates and their damage boost in the future. Our current levels were set in response to the overwhelming feedback we've received in recent days, along with a look at in-game metrics. Clearly, there is a large group out there that welcomed the initial challenge and variety, but there was also clearly a large group that felt we needed to dial back the spawn rate and damage spikes this new system provided. Ultimately, we appreciate all of the feedback and will continue to take a look at the system in an effort to find the right balance while also increasing challenge overall." I have to say, personally, I'm a bit disappointed. I understand why they made this change, but I disagree with it. I try to keep an open mind and not be biased, but I really was liking the Monster Champions as they were originally implemented. However, bottom line, there were just too many players complaining about the new system, and there's just too much division in the community overall. Also, the developers mentioned the change was due to, in part, metrics. We don't know what that means. I'm assuming that means that the number of logins or DDO store purchases or quest completions went down to some extent. To some extent, that reflected that a large portion of the community did not like this new system. However, thinking about it, I think a lot of the complaints were due to sudden shock and unfamiliarity with the system. DDO is it's a game of comfort for a lot of players, and they don't like sudden changes in any form unless it's a buff. And honestly, I wish the developers would have given the system a little more time before making a change. I think this change was too sudden. If the developers would have given this a couple of weeks, players might have come around. I think the developers should have at least waited for the initial wave of uproar to die down a little bit. Now, not all players would have come around, but I think a portion at least would have come around, and giving this more time would have given the developers more time to get feedback. I think a lot of the feedback, as I said, was due to shock and unfamiliarity. If more players would have had time to play with the system, I think some of them would have come around. Also, the developers mentioned introducing a champion reward system. They mentioned they have one in the works. They haven't told us exactly what it is. However, one of the developers mentioned the possibility of a champion token system. So each champion you kill will drop a token, a champion token, and you can later turn these tokens in for some kind of prize. I think if they would have rolled out a champion reward system at the same time as the new champions, we could have seen a much more positive feedback from the player base. One of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue with this system that players didn't like, was the effect it had on elite bravery bonus streaks. For a lot of players, these new champions made it impossible or much more difficult or much more time consuming for them to get their elite bravery bonus streak, and they weren't given anything worthwhile in compensation for this increased time. I think if the developers would have put an initial XP bonus on top of these champions, given players a reason or some kind of prize initially for killing champions, we could have seen a different response from the community. They should have waited to roll out champions with the reward system. They should have either had the champion reward system ready or waited to release the champions until they had decided and had a chance to develop that reward system. We could have seen a much different response from the community. However, in the end, no matter what they would have done, I think the developers have just acted too late on making the game harder. Players have gotten so used to elite streaks being the default difficulty, it's so hard to go back. You can buff things, and players are always going to be accepting of that, but players always are going to have resistance to nerfs, even if they're nerfs that make the game more fun or are good for the community or good for the game as a whole. In the day or two I've had to play this DDO with the new champion system, I've found the changes to be extremely noticeable. I've ran several quests, the Web of Chaos and Epic Elite, both before and after the change. I've ran some Evening Star quests. I've ran some Three Barrel Cove on Epic. A few other quests, but I've really felt the difference in this nerf. It feels much easier after. I don't know if those percentage chances were correct prior to the nerf, because it seemed like a lot more than 12% of monsters were spawning as champions, and it does seem that that new 9 and 6% is more correct. Either way, I'm seeing a huge difference in the number of champions, and maybe it's just a luck thing. Maybe I haven't played long enough to really get an accurate depiction of how many are spawning, but it seems to me that a much larger percentage is not spawning are not spawning as champions as compared to how many were spawning before. I had to watch out on Epic Hard before this change, but now I hardly even notice the spike damage. The spike damage change, as I said, was supposed to be reduced by 25%, but it seems like a lot more to me than that. And again, maybe this is due to me only playing with this new change for a day or two, but it seems like the spike damage decrease was a lot more than the developers told us. I don't doubt their numbers, but a lot of factors can go into that 25%, and we don't have a detailed depiction of how that 25% was applied. But either way, it seems a lot easier on Epic Hard now. I don't see much of a difference from pre-update 24 to prior update 24 on Epic Hard. Epic Elite, I'm not going to say right now. I've run a few Epic Elites, but not as many as Epic Hard, so I don't have a good enough picture right now as to how that's changed. So now we've come to this impasse here, where how can the developers please everybody? How can they please both casual players who didn't like this change and veteran players who are now upset about this nerf? I don't think, even though the developers have told us that they'll consider changes up or down in the future, I highly doubt we'll see them unnerf the champions. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I would like to see them unnerf the champions to an extent, if they're willing, especially on epics. But I doubt that's going to happen considering the division among the community. Some ways they can attempt to please both players is with future content. I hope that in this coming year in 2015 that they continue on a trend of making new content extremely challenging. In the new pack, Heart of Madness, the quest Terminal Delirium is the newest Extreme Challenge dungeon. It's labeled as an Extreme Challenge dungeon, and it is extremely challenging. I've ran it once on Epic Hard, and man, that was before the champion nerf, but man, it was really challenging for an Epic Hard quest. It felt like an Epic Elite quest on Epic Hard. I couldn't imagine how hard that thing would be on Epic Elite. But I hope they continue this trend of making the end game at least more challenging. It may be too late to go and change heroics back to what the difficulty once was in earlier days of DDO, but they can still modify the end game whenever it comes, the new content, because players won't get upset if a quest is initially hard. They'll only get upset if the quest was easy and then turned to be more difficult, which is what has happened with the initial Monster Champion implementation. So what do you think? Do you agree with the nerf, or do you wish the champions would have stayed the way they were? Leave me a comment and let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe and tell your DDO friends and guildies about my channel. Thanks for watching.